But let's get a little bit more specific. I just estimated the strength of that scatter plot. I said it was like moderate to strong. That is incredibly vague and it's only an estimate. So it's not a very specific way to discuss the strength of a correlation, which is where the correlation coefficient comes in. The correlation coefficient is an R value, which tells us the exact, precise mathematical strength of the relationship between these variables. And it's a very long process to calculate it by hand, which we won't be going through in this video, but it is something you'll definitely be covering in class. And yeah, it's very important to be familiar with that process. So what does an R value tell us? R values tell us the strength of a linear relationship, and they can range between -1 and 1. So -1 is a perfect negative relationship. So if we had like a little scatter plot here, a perfect negative correlation would be like a direct perfect negative correlation. And +1 would be a direct perfect positive correlation. If it's close to 0 in the middle, that means like all of our dots are like really randomly scattered around and we don't really have an association present. But you can start to see how like having this range and like the statistical process of calculating an R value, that's actually a really valuable thing because it can tell us the exact and precise mathematical strength of the relationship. But one thing I will show you is how to calculate this with a calculator. This is one of the most time-saving and helpful tricks I know. It certainly doesn't replace actually knowing the full process and how to calculate it, because there is a chance you'll need to apply that within an exam, for example. But if you're asked to calculate a correlation coefficient, for example, like a multiple choice question, or if you wanted to check your answer, being able to kind of do that on a calculator is such like a massive like time saver, and it's just like a very valuable trick to have in the back of your mind. But again, it doesn't substitute knowing the actual process. And my last hint before we get onto that is to be really familiar with your formula sheet, which I've linked in the slides, so you can go down and download those as well if you'd like to, because it's really, I can't stress enough how important it is to know what's on your formula sheet. It is a publicly available document. You're meant to be able to be familiar with it. And why it's like so important is so that you know what formulas are on there, and so that you know how to use the version that's on the formula sheet. Or if you don't like the specific version on the formula sheet, you'll know that you need to memorize the one that you prefer to use, so that you'll have that ready in your mind to use in the exam. And also, not all the formulas are on the formula sheet. So being very familiar of what's on there, do you know how to use it, and is that the version you want to be using? So get familiar with your formula sheet as well as the syllabus. They're like the most handy documents because they pretty much tell you, they're designed to tell you what you need to know and how to approach it. So definitely find those ones. So this here, again, slides available to download. I definitely recommend you taking a photo or downloading the slides or jotting this down or giving it a try now on your calculator so you can have a practice of it. But yeah, this is how to calculate a correlation coefficient using your scientific calculator. So if you press mode, which should be a button on my calculator, it's in like the top right hand corner. If you press mode, it'll pop up with 3 options. What you want to do is press 2 for the stat mode, which will put your calculator into statistics mode, which changes it in some small way and is just part of the process of how you get to where you want to be, I suppose. And then you press 2, which will say A plus BX, which is referring to the fact that it's bivariate data. And then what you do is a little table will pop up and you enter your X and your Y values. So you might move around the grid using the arrows. You might go like, up and down, left and right, and you enter the number and then click enter. And then you enter your next number, click enter. Then you might need to use the arrows to move around to like the Y column, for example, until all of your X and Y values are entered. So you'll have a corresponding X and a corresponding Y value for each value. And then you press on, and this will clear your data, but don't stress. It's all part of the process, and the calculator does have it stored in its memory. The next few steps, you kind of do need to remember these ones a little bit as well. You press shift, and then you press 1, and then you press 5. and it'll come up, the option for 5 will say reg, and that's short for regression, and we're doing regression analysis. So that's the type of data analysis that we're doing. And then the option for 3 will be R, which is the correlation coefficient. So then you press 3 for R and then equals, and it will give you a correlation coefficient. If these little prompts don't pop up, you might have done something a little bit wrong along the way, so you might need to try that again potentially. But then as long as it gives you a number, and it should definitely be between -1 and 1, you'll know that that's giving you the correlation coefficient. So this massive time saver, I definitely recommend you learn this process, because for general maths, we get our calculators for both exams, which is just so beyond valuable and helpful. So definitely make the most of that. And then my last little tip is make sure you put your calculator back to the regular mode once you're done, just because the statistics mode can really mess with the settings a little bit. I don't exactly know how it works, but it is important to put it back into the regular mode. So you press mode again and then 1, which will say comp, and then to switch it back to the normal mode. And then if you need to do any more statistics calculations, you just again go back to the start, press mode 2, and it'll be back into statistics mode. So definitely take note of this. It's incredibly helpful. And again, if you have any issues with that, please let me know in the live chat, and I'll be there available to help you out with that. And hopefully, get you on the right track with that, because it's a really, really helpful trick. Awesome. This is another really valuable resource. This is like a rough guide for how to interpret R values. So again, anything above 0 is going to be positive. The number is positive, means it's going to be a positive correlation, which reflected on a scatter plot means it's going to be moving up. Because again, positive means as this variable is increasing, this variable is increasing too. So that's positive. And the stronger it is, the more predictable the relationship is, the more strongly correlated they are. And again, anything below 0 is going to be negative. And again, as we get closer to -1, it's going to be stronger negative, and as we get closer to 0, there's a weaker association or no association if it's around 0. So again, this is just a rough guide or chart of how to interpret R values, and then also what that looks like in a scatter plot, so you can kind of visually get an idea of what that looks like.